Tappei has just released Arc 7 Chapter 17, so this will be a summary for this chapter, and I highly recommend you check my summary for Arc 7 Chapter 16. The chapter starts with Subaru breaking out in a cold sweat. What exactly happened, he wonders. He simply blinked and returned back a few moments earlier. It was as if his return by death power malfunctioned, and Subaru simply returned without the dying aspect. Subaru rationalizes it. He's only ever gone back by dying, therefore he must have died. Subaru thinks about how he died, and he actually thinks about his surroundings. Nothing happened which would have gotten him killed. Subaru berates himself for not paying attention to his surroundings. However, he actually double backs. Subaru realizes he's an ordinary person, and you can't expect him to simply notice very small changes in the surroundings and then act on it. He was being too hard on himself. Subaru thinks back to his first death at the Sand Sea. This death was very similar to that. He was simply annihilated by Shola in that instance. But of course now he was in the city, so the environment was very different. Subaru wonders if there was a sniper that hit him in the city, and wonders if there was an angle where someone could land a shot on Subaru. Whilst he was thinking that, he's interrupted by Flop asking him what's wrong. Flop acts in a comical manner to make Subaru feel better. Subaru realizes that Flop may have killed him, however there was nothing indicating that Flop attacked him since Subaru was speaking to him and looking at him. Subaru does know there are people in the world that can kill him without him even reacting, but Flop doesn't seem to be like one of those people. Subaru rationalized if Flop would kill him, it would make no sense. Flop helped him into the city. If Flop or the other O'Connell sibling wanted Subaru dead to rob him, why would they even get him into the city where it's crowded? They could have just killed Subaru outside of the city. It made no rational sense. It could not have been Flop. Subaru then went on to ask Flop why he's being so kind and helpful to Subaru and the group. Flop thought about this question and responded with revenge. Revenge seemed to be the reason why Flop is helping Subaru and the group. Flop continues, him and his sister, Medium O'Connell, were orphans. It was a very terrible way to live, yet him and his sister lived on the edge of life and death. Flop continues, stating that he wants revenge on the world itself. Subaru is confused, and Flop explains that him and his sister used to get beaten up by the adults. But the adults who beat Flop and Medium up were unhappy. They were still unhappy and depressed. These adults and children are unhappy due to the world they live in. So in order for Flop to get revenge on the world, he helped Subaru and the group. Subaru, happy with Flop's answer, says he's very glad to have met Flop and Medium. Subaru states that the road they're going down has bad luck. Subaru uses terminology from Japan and Flop doesn't understand it. But the gist of it is to take a different path to their destination. Subaru believes that if they take a different path, they would then of course avoid his death. Subaru and Flop went down a different path, and Flop of course agreed. As they did so, weaving around the alleyway, Flop actually looked back, and he made a wide expression. Subaru seeing this turned around, but he couldn't. Someone grabbed his head and cut Subaru's throat with a knife. Subaru was bleeding out. Subaru then took off his jacket and used it to wrap around his neck. He again berates himself for distrusting Flop. Subaru needs to get back to Rem as he bleeds out. As he thinks about this, Subaru dies. Subaru has reset back to Flop, telling him not to frown. Subaru saw that his throat was no longer cut. Subaru this time states he isn't feeling well, asking Flop to come back to the inn with him, stating that he needs to hold Rem's hand. Flop again was pretty good with this when it came to listening to Subaru, but Subaru didn't know what direction he would walk in. Maybe walking in public was the best so he wouldn't get assassinated. As Subaru thinks about this, Flop tells him that Subaru's hands are cold and he better get back to his wife so she can warm them up. Subaru decides on what to do. Going back to the inn would give the assassin a false sense of security. The streets were less crowded than the capital, but it was better to travel on the main street than the alleyways. Subaru decided whether or not he should go to the inn, but he tells Flop he can't. Subaru realizes he's flip-flopping all over the place with his decision, no pun intended. He of course wonders what his relationship with Flop is. They just met. It wasn't like he had a relationship with him similar to, say, the Emilia camp or the Anastasia camp. Subaru then has a revelation. It may have been the hunter. After all, the hunter chased Subaru from the Badheim jungle, and now the hunter was back for more after stalking Subaru to the city. Flop asks if Subaru is okay, again concerned for Subaru, and Subaru wants to ask him a question. Flop states that it's perfectly fine. Subaru says that there is a request he needs for a medium, and the idea is of course that if someone is attacking you, you simply need to use someone who is stronger. Subaru states that someone is following them. Flop, upon hearing this, turned around and analysed the situation and caught wind of something. People were screaming, and Subaru turned to look in Flop's direction. There was a giant dragon carriage coming towards them, and it hit Subaru straight on. Subaru's body was broken. He could feel pain all over, and he couldn't say anything. With that, Subaru died. Subaru returned again, this time visibly shaken. He hugged his shoulders. Even if other people have forgotten what had happened, Subaru's soul remembered. The first death was instantaneous, the second was decapitation, and the third was being run over by a dragon carriage. Their target was definitely Subaru. Subaru went to speak to Flop, who was of course concerned. But he realized that if Subaru was killed, then obviously anyone who was cautious enough would then kill Flop afterwards. Subaru clenched his teeth and steals his resolve. He grabs Flop's hand and they run. Flop is of course confused, and Subaru says they have limited time. Subaru said they would run to the tavern to buy an escort, although Subaru wasn't necessarily going there for the escort, but for another reason, which of course is a mercenary. The scene changes and Subaru is speaking to the tavern owner. This time Subaru and Flop made it. There was no evil hand that stopped them. We see that Subaru is trying to hire the strongest person around, and the bar owner talks about Rowan. We see that Flop and Medium are well known by the tavern owner for helping a lot of people, and as a result a lot of people owe them favours, and the tavern owner sees them as suckers in a way. Subaru explains that he will repay the kindness back to Medium and Flop. We see that Rowan is in the corner of the tavern, a man in his 50s with his hair tied in a bun. Subaru approaches him saying that he has a job for him. Subaru also states that he stinks of alcohol, and Rowan calls him rude. Rowan seems to be an alcoholic. He's drinking early in the morning, and he asks for a drink. Flop is actually about to buy him a drink, but Subaru stops Flop and moves in front of Rowan, saying that he won't buy Rowan a drink, but he can give Rowan the money to buy a drink if he accepts the job. Rowan realizes that Subaru is in quite the pickle, and Subaru offers all of the money he got from the El Gino horn. Flop did try and stop Subaru, but Subaru pushed Flop's hand away. We also see that Subaru gave no emergency money to Rem, so this was all of Subaru's money. Subaru asks if Rowan is up for it, and Rowan of course looks inside the bag and he's happy with it. Subaru states that he cannot go any higher, and Rowan understands Subaru's condition. Rowan stood up and pocketed Subaru's money. He accepted the job. Flop asked if Subaru was okay with giving away all of his money, but Subaru said it was fine, and we also learned that Subaru paid for accommodation at the inn, so they would have a place to stay anyway. Rowan wanted to know Subaru's name, and when Subaru went to speak, Rowan thrust his hand out to silence Subaru and gazed at the window behind him. Rowan has seemed to sense someone chasing Subaru and asked who it was. Subaru of course doesn't know, but it's the main reason why he went to hire Rowan. Rowan, hearing this, jokes that he could have got more money from the deal. However, he was joking. Despite this though, Rowan looked very confident with his skills. He wasn't anxious or nervous, and the alcohol had faded from his vision and he had the look of someone strong. We see that Rowan looks like a samurai and has a unique looking sword. Rowan states that even if he drinks, he can cut anyone down. We see an injured man fly into the bar. The other patrons don't really react since this seems to be very normal for them. The only people that go to the injured man is, of course, Flop and the tavern owner. The tavern owner, of course, cares about getting blood on the floor. Mr. Flop tried to carry the man, but Subaru realized something was wrong and pulled Flop away. A second after, the man's body exploded, lighting the tavern on fire. He was a human bomb. Screams erupted as the smoke burned people's eyes. A group of drunks tried to scramble for the entrance, and as they did, a second explosion went off, causing even more destruction. Subaru and the group decided to leave through the back entrance, and Subaru blamed himself for not seeing this happen. After all, in the previous loop, the attacker used a dragon carriage to kill him, so it's only natural that destruction is fine for them. We see them get to the back door, but it's closed and won't open. Rowan cuts the door open and they get outside. Subaru thought about the situation. A man with a human bomb was thrown inside the store, the smoke had irritants which caused people to rush to the entrance, then a second bomb was planted at the entrance. The back door didn't open. Subaru called out to Rowan about his unease, but as he turned to Rowan, Rowan's head was crushed and he slumped down dead. The tavern owner screamed, but a blow hit his chest and blew him apart. Instantaneous death. Behind the flame was a man holding an axe. Flop asked him why the man was doing this. Standing up to the man, and the man with the axe raised his hand and crushed Flop's head, killing him. Subaru was scared and asked the same question as Flop. Why? Subaru knew he would die next. The man raised his arm with an axe. Subaru shouted out, "What the hell?" And the man responded, "I'm not going to tell you anything, okay? I'm not going to tell you anything." Subaru was dumbfounded at this, as he tried to match the voice to one he heard elsewhere. As Subaru made a noise his head was caved in, he heard a small and hard sound. This was of course his head cracking in the previous chapter, and that's where this chapter ends. So, thinking about the chapter, it seems that the attacker is very smart. His voice seems to be familiar to Subaru, and they use an axe. And there's only one person I can think of. It's not the hunter, and it's actually Todd himself. So this is most likely Todd back for revenge, and that's the reason why he's going for Subaru. As for why Todd is like indiscriminately killing people, I'm not sure why, but it's interesting that Todd is this strong when Subaru was able to escape from him before. So I'm not sure exactly what's going on, but I believe it's Todd. But let me know what you think. Thanks for watching, and thank you to my channel members. I'll see you guys next time.